My name is Daniela Rodriguez, and I never imagined my wedding day would become the day I'd have to prove my worth to a room full of strangers who had already decided I wasn't good enough. But let me start from the beginning, because every good story needs context, and this one is complicated. I'm an art conservator at the Metropolitan Museum. I spend my days in a quiet studio, restoring paintings that most people will never know were damaged. It's meticulous work, invisible work, but I love it. There's something beautiful about bringing forgotten masterpieces back to life, about seeing what others overlook. I guess in a way, that's what this whole story is about, seeing what people overlook. I met Christopher Whitmore 18 months before our wedding at a museum gala. His family had just donated money for a new wing, and he was there representing them, looking uncomfortable in his tailored tuxedo, like he'd rather be anywhere else. We started talking about a Caravaggio painting, and I mentioned a restoration technique most people wouldn't know about. His eyes lit up, not because he knew about art, but because, as he later told me, I was the first person that night who talked to him about something real, something that wasn't about money or status or business connections. We fell in love the way people do in movies, slowly and then all at once. Coffee dates turned into weekend walks through galleries. He'd ask me about my work, genuinely interested in the stories behind each painting I restored. I'd listen to his dreams of opening a medical clinic for underserved communities, using his medical degree for something meaningful instead of just managing the family's pharmaceutical empire. He was kind, thoughtful, and so different from what I expected when I heard the name Whitmore. Because, let me tell you about the Whitmores. Old money, pharmaceutical dynasty, 3 generations of wealth and influence. Christopher's mother, Patricia, ran the family like a corporation, all controlled smiles and calculated moves. His father, Graham, was a shadow of a man who'd learned long ago that disagreeing with Patricia wasn't worth the effort. And his sister, Cordelia, 26 going on spoiled teenager, had never heard the word no in her entire life. The first time I met them at their estate, a sprawling property that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, I knew I was being evaluated. Patricia's eyes scanned me from head to toe, taking in my thrift store dress, my minimal jewelry, my sensible shoes. Her smile never reached her eyes as she asked about my family, my background, my, quote, prospects. Every question was a trap, every answer measured against some invisible standard I couldn't possibly meet. Christopher defended me that day, his hand finding mine under the dinner table, squeezing gently as if to say, "Ignore them, we're in this together." But I could see the doubt his family was planting, the tiny seeds of concern about the museum worker dating their precious son and heir. Over the next year, those seeds tried to take root. Patricia would make comments about my modest apartment in Brooklyn, suggesting Christopher deserved someone who understood his lifestyle. Cordelia would post pictures on social media of Christopher with women from their social circle, tagging them with heart emojis, making sure I saw every single one. Graham would bring up prenuptial agreements at family dinners, talking loudly about protecting family assets as if I weren't sitting right there. But Christopher never wavered. He proposed on a Tuesday afternoon in my tiny studio at the museum, surrounded by half-restored paintings and the smell of linseed oil. No fancy restaurant, no elaborate setup, just him and me and a simple ring that meant everything because it came from his heart, not his wallet. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Patricia took over immediately, insisting on a venue, a guest list, a level of extravagance that made me uncomfortable. I wanted something small and intimate. She wanted a spectacle, 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. Christopher tried to find middle ground, but Patricia had a way of making every compromise feel like a personal attack on the family's reputation. The night before the wedding, I lay awake in my hotel room thinking about my grandmother. Abuela Catalina had died 3 years earlier, and I missed her with an ache that never quite faded. She'd raised me after my parents passed away when I was 8, filled our small apartment with love and art and stories about my grandfather, a brilliant chemist who'd died before I was born. On her deathbed, she'd held my hand with surprising strength and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "Mija," she whispered, Never let them see your worth until they show you theirs. People reveal who they are when they think you have nothing. Remember that. I'd nodded, confused, grief-stricken, not knowing that 3 years later her words would become my entire strategy. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room looking at my dress. It was beautiful, simple, elegant, purchased on sale because that's what I'd told everyone I could afford. The truth was complicated, and it was about to become everyone's business. My best friend Lucia arrived with coffee and encouragement, helping me with my hair, telling me I looked stunning, that Christopher was lucky to have me. She knew more than most, but even she didn't know everything. Some secrets you keep close until the exact right moment, and I could feel that moment approaching like a storm on the horizon. The country club was decorated like something out of a fairy tale, all white roses and crystal chandeliers, and a level of luxury that made my stomach turn. As I arrived, I could hear the whispers starting already. Guests in designer gowns and expensive suits, turning to look at me, at my simple dress, my minimal makeup, my lack of ostentatious jewelry. I heard the word, quaint. I heard someone say, bless her heart. I heard another guest whisper to Patricia, asking if she was okay with all this. Patricia, standing near the entrance in a gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, gave me a smile that could freeze water. "Daniela, darling," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "what a charming dress, very understated." The way she said understated made it clear she meant cheap. Walking down that aisle was one of the hardest things I've ever done. 300 pairs of eyes on me, judging, calculating, wondering what Christopher Whitmore could possibly see in the poor museum worker. I could hear the whispers, see the smirks, feel the weight of their collective disdain. But then I saw Christopher at the altar, and his face was full of nothing but love and pride, and for a moment, that was enough. The ceremony was beautiful despite everything. We said our vows, genuine promises of love and partnership, and when Christopher kissed me, I almost forgot about his horrible family and their cruel judgments. Almost. But then came the reception, and that's when everything changed. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. I was seated between Christopher's cousin Bradford, who spent the entire first course making jokes about gold diggers loud enough for the table to hear, and an elderly aunt who kept asking intrusive questions about when we'd have children and whether I understood the responsibility of carrying on the Whitmore name. Christopher tried to redirect conversations, but he couldn't be everywhere at once. Then Cordelia stood up to give her toast as maid of honor, and I knew it was going to be bad. She started with childhood stories about Christopher, painting him as this perfect prince who could have had anyone, literally anyone. Then she turned to me, her smile sharp as glass. "And now he's found love with Daniela," she said, which just goes to show that true love really can conquer all, even the most significant differences. She emphasized differences like it was a weapon. "We're so happy to welcome Daniela into our family, and we know she'll learn so much from us about the Whitmore way of life." The subtext was clear. I was the charity project, the fixer-upper, the woman who needed to be taught how to exist in their world. Guests laughed politely, some less politely. I saw phones come out, people recording, probably already planning their social media posts about the wedding of the year where the bride was so obviously out of her league. I squeezed Christopher's hand under the table, and he squeezed back, frustrated and angry on my behalf. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was waiting. Then Patricia stood up, and I knew the moment had arrived. "I have a special announcement," she said, her voice carrying across the room with practiced ease. "As a gift to the happy couple, Graham and I have arranged something very important for their future together." She snapped her fingers, and a man in a suit approached with a folder. "We've had our family attorneys draw up a small document, just a formality really to protect everyone's interests." She opened the folder and pulled out a prenuptial agreement. At the reception, in front of 300 guests, with phones recording. "Now I know this is unconventional," Patricia continued, her smile growing wider, "but we believe in transparency in this family. This agreement simply states that in the unlikely event of a separation, assets remain with their original owners. Very standard, very reasonable. And since this marriage is built on love, not financial considerations, I'm sure Daniela won't have any problem signing it right now in front of all our witnesses. The room went completely silent. I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see if I'd break, if I'd cry, if I'd prove every terrible thing they'd been thinking about me. Christopher stood up, furious. "Mother, this is completely inappropriate." "Sit down, Christopher," Patricia said coldly. "If Daniela truly loves you, she'll sign. Unless," she turned to me, "money is what you're after?" Graham materialized beside me with a pen. Cordelia had her phone out, live streaming to thousands of followers. Bradford was actually smirking. The museum director, one of my few allies in the room, looked horrified. Lucia started to stand, to defend me, but I caught her eye and shook my head. This was my moment, the moment my grandmother had prepared me for. The moment when I would show them all exactly who they were dealing with. I stood up slowly, took the pen from Graham, and watched Patricia's triumphant smile grow. She thought she'd won. They all thought I was about to sign away any claim to the Whitmore fortune, cementing my place as the poor girl who married up and knew her place. "I'll sign," I said quietly, and Patricia actually laughed. "But first," I continued, reaching into my small clutch, "I have a wedding gift for my husband." I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Christopher. He opened it, confused, and I watched his face change as he read the contents. Shock, disbelief, awe. "What is it?" Patricia demanded. Christopher looked at me, and I nodded. "It's the deed," he said slowly, "to the building on Madison Avenue. The one I've been trying to buy for months to expand the clinic. The seller was anonymous, they wouldn't negotiate, they wanted too much money, and I couldn't—" He stopped, staring at me. "You bought it?" "I did," I said, my voice steady now, growing stronger. "It cost $4.2 million. I paid cash. It's yours now, my wedding gift to you." The silence in the room was deafening. Patricia's smile finally faltered. "What kind of game is this?" "No game," I said, turning to address the room. "My grandmother was Catalina Rodriguez. Some of you might know that name from the art world. She was a reclusive painter who died 3 years ago. Her works have been appreciating significantly since her death. I inherited 47 of her original paintings, along with 3 properties in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Over the past 3 years, I've been quietly selling pieces to collectors and galleries. My current net worth is approximately $90 million. You could have heard a pin drop. Phones that had been recording my humiliation were now capturing something else entirely. Patricia's face had gone white. Graham loosened his collar. Cordelia's mouth was literally hanging open. "I work at the museum because I love art conservation," I continued, "not because I need the money. I live modestly because I prefer it that way. I dressed simply and drove an old car because I wanted to see if your family would accept me for who I am, not what I have." I looked directly at Patricia. "You failed that test spectacularly." I picked up the prenuptial agreement and slowly tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the silent ballroom. "I won't be signing this," I said. "Instead, I have some terms of my own." I pulled out a second envelope and I saw actual fear flash across Patricia's face. "I know about the patents," I said quietly. "The pharmaceutical formulas that built this family's fortune." Patricia's hand flew to her throat. Graham took a step backward. Christopher looked confused, not understanding yet. "My grandfather," I said, "Roberto Rodriguez, worked at Whitmore Pharmaceuticals 40 years ago. He was a research chemist, brilliant and innovative. He developed the compound that became your flagship drug, the one that's generated hundreds of millions in revenue. But he never got credit for it. Your father," I looked at Graham, "took my grandfather's research, filed the patents under his own name, and gave my grandfather nothing. When my grandfather tried to fight it, he was fired, blacklisted, and died 2 years later, broken and penniless." Christopher turned to his father, his face ashen. "Dad?" Graham couldn't meet his son's eyes. "I've known for 6 months," I said. "My grandmother gave me a box of documents before she died. Original lab notes in my grandfather's handwriting, correspondence between him and the Whitmore Company, witness statements from other researchers who knew the truth. My lawyers have been building a case. We're ready to file." Patricia found her voice. "You're lying. You're making this up." "I have 37 pages of documentation," I said calmly, "including a memo from your husband's father acknowledging Roberto's work before the patents were filed. I can make this all very public very quickly. Or," I paused, "we can come to an agreement." "What do you want?" Graham asked, his voice hollow. $50 million, I said, "to establish a research foundation in my grandfather's name, funding pharmaceutical research with proper credit and compensation for innovators. A public acknowledgement from this family of Roberto Rodriguez's contributions to your company's success. And Patricia?" I turned to her. "You resign from every charitable board you sit on. You built your reputation on stolen legacy. That ends now." Christopher was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "You knew all of this? When we met, when we fell in love." "I fell in love with you," I said, meeting his eyes. "Not your family, not your money. You. I needed to know that you'd choose what's right over what's comfortable, that you'd stand up to them when it mattered." He looked at his mother, at his father, at the remnants of their carefully constructed image scattered across the ballroom floor. Then he took off his Whitmore family crest cufflinks, the ones passed down through 3 generations, and set them on the table. "I choose her," he said. "I choose honesty. I choose doing what's right." Patricia tried one last time. "Christopher, she's manipulated you, planned this whole thing. She exposed the truth," Christopher said firmly. "Something this family should have done 40 years ago." Graham, to everyone's surprise, nodded slowly. "She's right," he said quietly. "About all of it. We've built everything on a lie." What happened next was chaos. Cordelia stormed out in tears. Several society friends approached me, suddenly eager to apologize, to be on the right side of this story. Bradford tried to claim he'd been joking earlier. The museum director raised his glass to me, and I saw respect in his eyes that had nothing to do with money. Lucia hugged me so hard I could barely breathe, whispering, "That's my best friend." Christopher and I left the reception early, and in the quiet of the car, he finally spoke. "You could have told me about your family's history with mine." "Would you have believed it?" I asked. "Without evidence, without seeing who your family really is." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry. For how they treated you. For what my family did to yours." "You're not responsible for their choices," I said. "But you are responsible for your own. And you chose right." That was 6 months ago. The Whitmores settled within the 48 hours I gave them. The foundation in my grandfather's name is now funding research for 12 different projects. Christopher's clinic opened last month in the building I gave him. Patricia and I maintain a cold but respectful distance. She resigned from her boards as agreed, and I think, deep down, some small part of her respects what I did, even if she hates that I did it. I still work at the museum. I still dress modestly, drive my old car, live in my Brooklyn apartment. Because here's what I learned from all of this. True wealth isn't about what you have. It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone diminish it. It's about choosing character over comfort, truth over convenience, love over legacy. My grandmother was right. People reveal who they are when they think you have nothing. The Whitmores showed me exactly who they were, and in return I showed them that worth can't be measured by the price of your dress or the size of your bank account. It's measured by how you treat people when you think no one's watching, by the choices you make when integrity costs you something. They tried to humiliate me at my own wedding. Instead, they gave me the perfect stage to prove that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who change everything. If you loved watching this story unfold, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my position, because I really want to know. And subscribe for more stories where karma comes full circle and the underestimated come out on top. Trust me, the next one is even more unbelievable. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let anyone make you feel small. You know your worth. Make sure they know it too.